Sorry, you cannot share your screen now, right, Ezio?
I cannot, no.
Okay. As far as I'm recording now, so I'm giving you the chance. You have?
Okay. Very good.
So now you should be able, and I
Yes.
think it's 5 minutes after 12. So I think it's time to start. Así es que, Salvador, si quieres, empezamos la sesión. Somos prácticamente todos los que teníamos previsto. Todo tuyo.
Ya somos 11, ¿no?
Sí que les voy a pedir a todos, si son tan amables, de silenciar sus micrófonos hasta el punto en que lleguemos al turno de preguntas y podremos activarlos porque no somos muchos y podremos hacerlo así. Gracias, hermano. Perfecto, Salvador, pues cuando quieras.
Bueno, buenos días y bienvenidos. Continuando con el programa de webinars por parte de AVEP, para mantener al día a nuestros asociados en temas de interés, presentamos hoy el webinar dedicado a los precios de las materias primas y su futura evolución. El mundo empresarial anda un tanto agitado. Cuando pensábamos que ya se estaban terminando los argumentos para los aumentos de los precios de las materias primas, nos encontramos con la subida de la energía y consecuentemente el transporte en porcentajes no conocidos hasta la fecha. No es un consuelo que no sean los plásticos los únicos. El cobre aumenta un 63%, el hierro un 52% o el aluminio más de un 40%. Las empresas afrontamos subidas de costes superiores al 150% que tendremos que repercutir en los precios. Por todo ello, dentro de nuestras sesiones de webinars para asociados, hemos organizado este, con el objeto de tener la mayor información posible sobre la evolución de los principales materiales plásticos. Les agradezco su participación y que les sea leve. Para ello, contamos hoy con la participación de Chemorbis, firma especializada en precios, noticias y tendencias de los mercados globales de polímeros. Adelante, Cristina.
Muchas gracias, Salvador, por la presentación. Efectivamente, y como Salvador decía, contamos hoy con el doctor Ezio Filippi, que es Chief Representative de la firma Chemorbis, firma especializada en precios, noticias y tendencias de los mercados globales de polímeros. La presentación será obviamente en inglés, sin traducción, pero dispondrán luego del vídeo para poderlo compartir o revisar. Sí que les voy a agradecer a todos los que, exacto, gracias, que se silencien para mejorar la calidad del sonido. Thank you, Ezio. Ezio Filippi is the chief representative of the firm Chemorbis. Is a specialized firm from price, news, and trends on global markets for polymer materials. So, Ezio, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Cristina. Thank you, Salvador, for the nice presentation and the occasion to speak to this audience. It's a first for me, for the Spanish audience. So I forgive you for, forgive me for my not being able to speak in Spanish. I used to do it, but in a formal occasion, I don't feel safe enough to speak it. So if you're welcome to make your questions in Spanish at the end, I will try to answer them. So no problem. I promise next time maybe I will speak in Spanish. So let's start with the presentation. And who is Chemorbis? I'll tell you a few words about it, and we will dive into the data of polymer price trends starting from 2020 until now. We will talk about the logistic issues. We will crunch a bit the data of import-exports, and then what is more important maybe for you is also what we see as a price trend for the future. In Chemorbis, we do have a price forecast report for the main polymers for the 12 months ahead, and I will tell you about that. So Chemorbis was founded in 2001, so about 20 years ago. We have a market, let's say, base which is covering global markets for the main polymers, but recently for Europe we introduced also engineering polymers, recycled polymers, which are becoming more and more important, and more recently the biopolymers as well, on top of feedstock and market. A bit of description of what is important for us and how we collect this information. Basically, every office of Chemorbis in the region, and Italy is covering Europe mostly. We interview the companies who are active in the transactions of buying and selling plastics. So we interview a lot of buyers, a lot of converters, and the first thing we do is the cross-check to see the reality of the data. So if the buyer tells me he buys at 100, I have to find the 100 at the seller side. So we are not manipulated. And in fact, the other important thing of our methodology for collecting information is the neutrality policy. We have no interest in saying prices are going up or down because we are close to a producer or to a converter or whatever. So we are neutral. And therefore we represent the market as close as it is possible. Of course, in this period, you will understand it is difficult to represent the market because the price ranges also are very wide. So there will be somebody who has a very cheap price and other bit higher because of other things and issues. But we try to do our best, of course. So this is Chemorbis basically. Let's start to look at what happened in 2020. Of course, everybody knows that it was the start of the COVID pandemic. And as a result, all the economy slowed in Q1 and came to a halt in Q2. And the oil and raw materials, everything went down. All the prices were down, and mostly they stayed stable for the rest of the year, although towards the end of 2020 they started to rise. Plastic volumes instead they lost little because plastic is used for many applications, which helped it a lot also to survive during the COVID pandemic. And in fact, what we lost in the first quarters of 2020 was recovered in the second half. Mostly in Europe, we think about 4 or 5% volume loss in 2020 versus 2019. So it's nothing really with what happened. In general, the margins of the polymer producers were low. Polymer prices were very volatile, and they touched historical lows since 2008, second only to 2008, in around April, May of 2020. What is happening nowadays, and what we see it's important to consider for the future, is instead that there is a very strong economy recovery. Some sectors drove it since the end of 2020, and this is packaging, building and construction, a lot of subventions from the government to stimulate the economy, and more recently automotive, although automotive is slowing down because of other issues, the microchips availability and so on. During this period, we had limited availability of polymers, but also other materials, not to mention metals, steel, wood, paper, and so on. And there was a bit of, let's say, opportunistic approach also from other markets, which are increasing raw materials without really being justified by the supply-demand situations, pure speculation. We witnessed high logistic and freight costs. I will explain a little more about it later on. We, as a Europe, remained very low in prices during 2020. Other markets were faster to recover. Prices in Europe were lowest in the world, and therefore the polymer imports ceased for that. And in 2021, we saw also that the polymer imports in Europe slowed down because of other regions, and namely the freight, the logistic issues. So this was adding to the lack of polymers in the market. We saw an increasing oil and raw material prices. I say for now, because when we will look at the forecast, we will see that the oil is going down in the forecast, the more recent forecast for 2022. And in spring, second quarter this year, polymers touched historical highs. Actually, for some polymers like PVC, the running is not stopped there because they're still increasing. You can imagine that if you were buying 1,000 tons a month, 100 tons a month, or whatever, and paying double prices, it has also a financial impact on your credit line limits. So it's not only the lack of the polymers, the availability, but also the impact of the financial issues here. And most recently, we saw that there was in some issue for the energy. First, the energy costs, increasing raw materials and oil and so on, it has and gas has an impact on the cost of the energy. So polymers, which have a very high energy consumption to be made, like PVC, they suffer more, of course, for the cost side. But also in some region like China, there was a shortage of energy, and that is the reason mostly why the oil prices are going down, because China is buying from everywhere not to be short of energy. Let's look at the prices. What happened to polyethylene prices in the period from January 2020 until October 2021. On this chart, you can see two lines, the HDPE and LDPE in Europe. Northwest Europe is the NWE. And I correlated also them with the ethylene spot price. As you can see, the raw materials touch a minimum towards May 2020, and they started to increase sharply towards the end of 2020 and reached for the PE maximums in May of this year. And as you can see, an important point here is that ethylene, which is the raw material for which we make polyethylene, is not correlated. So the raw materials stayed flat and the polymer prices went up. This is because a combination of factors, and the main factors being the fact that the supply was critical. There was not enough polymer to satisfy the demand, which was growing very fast because of the economy recovery. Nowadays, we see prices slowing down, but not so much. They are still at very high levels. Let's look at the same thing for polypropylene. Again, I correlated the polypropylene prices with the propylene monomer. As you can see, starting in January 2021, the two prices are not correlated. So polymer monomer price is staying flat more or less, and polymer prices are going up. Polypropylene supply situation was even more critical than polyethylene. And in fact, the market suffered most, and we see the issue also here, because they touched the minimum, the prices in May, but they didn't go down really. It's still an improvement here, but we are seeing nowadays in the first days of the new month, November, prices are still going up, also for polyethylene. I want to mention a nice relation there is between standard contract markets like Europe and international markets like China, which are based mostly on spot transaction. You know the difference, right? Because a contract market is usually fixing the price for a month, but in spot markets you just deal your quantity, buy or sell, and that's the price, and can change week by week if not day by day. In this chart I correlated the LDPE price for Europe and China, the import China main port, and the polypropylene homopolymer for Europe and China again. So you can see that China touched in fact a minimum bit earlier than Europe. We touched them in May here, but they touched them in March, and they started to go down. So and nowadays our prices in Europe are going down, at least for PE. If not so much, but in China since July they are going up again. So if the spot markets anticipate the trends of the contract market as lower market, we have to anticipate at least for another few months some increases again in the markets. And the nice thing is that you can see that these prices are strictly correlated. So you can have, watching China prices, a nice benchmark for your home market prices. Let's look at the PVC prices. PVC is really a unique situation. As you can see, minimums were touched in May 2020. And they are increasing, slowing down a little bit, but always increasing month by month. They now achieved 1,700 levels in euro per ton in Europe, and there is no respite, there is no slowdown. The situation here is a combination. You know, Europe is the most exporter of PVC because our capacity production of PVC is higher than the local demand. But what happened in this period here is that Europe also exported a lot to outside markets nearby Mediterranean, but also further out, because the prices in those countries were higher. I'll show you the import-export data, and you will see clearly that the export was increasing in this period. So it means PVC demand was very strong in the market, and the supply was not enough to guarantee the demand. So prices went up. For PS, different story. On this graph you can see GPPS, HIPS, and also EPS. Minimums were touched in May 2020, then peak was May 2021, and since Styrenics is a kind of product segment that is suffering a lot about the volatility more than other products, we saw immediately a reduction in prices after May. In fact, now prices are stabilizing a little bit, but we will see in November probably another recovery of those prices. Supply situation was not so critical, also because Styrenics are used in some single-use plastics products, which are going to be abandoned in the coming period. So there will be extra supply available for this market. For PET, we can see the prices for PET bottle grade and the correlation between prices of paraxylene monomer in Europe. You see there is a parallel, but also for paraxylene prices remain flat, but PET prices increased. Now it's an interesting situation because the supply situation is not bad in Europe for PET. We have local production capacity enough to satisfy the demand, but there were a lot of imports from China and from Far Eastern countries, which of course in this period, particularly in 2021, they were not arriving because of the logistic issues. And this is why the reason also the prices of PET are already increasing since the last 2 months, recovering after a first slowdown in summer, even during the high season, which is stranger. But let's now have a look at the costs of logistics. Why did they increase? Again, it's related to COVID situation. Remember, the first half of 2020, the economy slowed down nearly to a halt, and global trading was basically halted as well. As a result, the number of ships was reduced by the owners in order to stabilize their costs. But at the same time, those who wanted to ship their products had to witness an increase of 3, 4, 5 times the cost of a normal container, particularly from Asia to Europe, because there were not enough containers available. Of course, the imports volume from typically import region like Europe suffered a lot, and we will see those in the charts ahead. We think that pardon me, the situation might return to normal levels towards the end of second quarter of 2022, when there will be, let's say, more capacity of containers available than it is nowadays. I mentioned capacity of containers because I share with you this graph, which is taken by McKinsey, basically correlates the total sailing capacity of containers starting from January 2019 until July of 2021. And you can see the total capacity has an impact whenever there is an issue. So it's either the normal festivities before the pandemic, like the China New Year's and so on, or it is the Suez Canal ship blocking the trade, or more seriously, because of COVID, China was shutting down major ports. And shutting down means for 30, 40 days, all the ships present, they cannot travel. And of course, the ships are loaded with containers, and those containers cannot be used for other purposes. Therefore, the global capacity of containers is reducing. Therefore, the prices are skyrocketing, are increasing a lot. Of course, this is only for related, just to explain you that it's the sailing capacity that matters, is not the demand recovery or increase due to the economy recovery. So there is indeed a growth. The GDP for world will increase by 5-6% this year, and it's a nice demand recovery, but that is not what is causing the issues of logistics. The issue of logistics is becoming by the limitation of the number of containers. Of course, the ship forwarders increased their fleet, but the moment you put the money to build a new ship containers, it takes 18 months until it is delivered. So we think that for the combination of the fact that the GDP economy of the world will grow in 2022, but to a slower pace than this year, and the fact that the pandemic will be under control, so there will not be more reductions, we think that these factors combined will make the global capacity of containers more available worldwide, and therefore the cost of freights will decrease gradually, and that's how we see it. Let's now look at the import-export data. Again, the period is January 2020 until August 2021. You know, the stats are always a bit reported later by the statistical offices. In this chart, you can see month by month the export of EU27 in yellow bar, and the blue bar is the imports. And the line represents the average price, statistical value. Is not market price, is statistical value of imports. As you can see, the price is going up after 2020, end of 2020. It touched a maximum towards May and it stayed there. And you can see that for polyethylene, the exports decreased as more as the prices in the local market increased, so attracting more quantities, and the imports also increased because our prices nowadays for polyethylene are highest in the world in Europe, and therefore you see a nice 400,000 kilotons. 400,000 tons per month are imported by Europe versus the less than 300 of the previous months in 2020. As you can see, the imports didn't decrease so much also during 2020. The reason is because the normal exporting country like Middle East and so on to Europe, they had contracts with the ship forwarders for their containers, so they didn't pay the extra cost that we saw for some spot deals of freights. Let's move to polypropylene. Polypropylene, I told you the situation was more critical for supply, and we can see that as much as the prices in Europe become more attractive for other exporting countries, the more the imports is increasing. Whereas before it's nearly doubling actually, but the level of monthly imports is now towards 200,000 tons, whereas it was 100 or so in the first period of 2020, and you see the prices are following the same path. Of course, the strong demand and the nice prices, high prices in Europe, Europe tend to sell more to internal markets, and so exports will go down also the same. PVC. As I told you, PVC, Europe for PVC is a major export market. So you see the exports are very consistent, and they were very, very high during 2020. And you see they decreased a lot in 2021. And as much as the prices were more interesting in Europe, the imports are increasing as well. Going from less than 25 to 60, 70 kilotons per month. For PS, I told you PS is a very volatile product, styrenics in general. Europe is self-sufficient, but imports are always available whenever there is an opportunity for selling at a profit, of course. And in this period, we are seeing prices going down already for 2-3 months for styrenics, and imports increased wherever the exports stabilized. Now, let's talk about the price forecast for 2022. When we designed our model, these reports are available since the end of 2019, so already 2 years. So we have a sort of understanding how reliable we are or not. When we designed the model, we thought there are 2 kinds of factors to consider in the model: the long-term ones. And the long terms, I mean beyond 3 months horizon, and these are few factors that you can take into account. Of course, there is the real important one, which is the oil futures and energy futures, and we use the EIA, the American agency forecast. They release a forecast every month. I will share with you that later. you can take in account the new capacities build up, because in the coming years, the new capacities are built. Like for you need extra ships. Also, polymer growth is typically 3, 4, 5% every year for polyolefins, for example, also for other polymers. So new plants are built. And to build a new plant, it has to be planned in advance 3, 4 years. So we know all the new capacities that will come online in the coming months and years. And then other factors can be seasonality, of course, or the GDP forecast. GDP can be broken down to regional level and monthly level. When we talk instead about short terms, the factors are many more. The most important factors, though, are those who influence the supply and demand of polymers. So the offer, the supply, we know exactly, because we know how many plants are producing the polymers in our region. We know their capacity. We know if they are running on a lower rate, or they are shut down for maintenances or for force majeures or whatever. We have the absolute detail of that. We know the imports and the exports, and therefore the balance is the local demand. So we know exactly that. But other factors are also important, like the consumers' expectations that can predict the demand trend in the coming months, 2 or 3 months. The international price trends, like I showed you before, the margins of producers. Sometimes in the past, you saw producers were increasing their prices because they said, our margins are too small. The trend between monomer spot and monomer contract and netbacks. By netbacks, I mean you have to think you are a seller of a polymer. You have 1,000 tons sitting perhaps in Dubai, and you wonder where you make the best profit to sell this 1,000 tons of polymer. So you consider the prices in the international markets and your costs, the correlated costs. The netback is basically what stays in your pocket after you deduct all the costs. And of course, the prices in Europe for polymers nowadays in Europe, they are very high. It means that the netbacks for exporting to Europe is attractive. So we are attracting polymers imports in this period. In other periods, when prices were very, very small, we didn't attract. So let's see the result of this model. First, the energy forecast, October. This is the latest one available. As you can see, it goes from October 21 to October 22. Actually, the IEA agency goes until December. But what we see here is the WTI price and the Brent oil price. Brent is bigger than WTI, and the natural gas. Apart from another rise, which they foresee in November, and for natural gas, also for normal higher consumption for heating purposes in the US, what they foresee is a gentle slowdown of prices, actually very constant slowdown. Although it doesn't go to the $40 per barrel, but it is indeed a 20–30% decrease they foresee during 2022. The reason behind this forecast is basically that there will be less demand than 2021 for oil, particularly because of the combination of fact that the economy will grow, but at a slower pace than this year. And the second fact is that they expect, the IEA guys, they expect that the production of particularly non-OPEC countries for oil will increase. So there will be an excess of supply, which will cause the prices to go down. So these are assumptions. It's not like the gospel, but it's what is available from a reputable source like the EIA. Now we combine this data into our models, and I'll show you now what is the result, for example, for polyethylene prices that Chemours is foreseeing for 2022. Actually, you see historical prices are done until September. This was released a few weeks ago, so October was still a forecast. We saw little decreases in October, but for the coming months, because of the higher oil prices, because of the economic growth and still supply situation not so comfortable, we see price increases. Okay, and then starting from February, decreases, but not to pre-COVID levels, to still very high levels. And here you can find HDP, LDP, and LLDPE. Of course, we have a full report for PE. It's 8 pages report, which explains why we support this vision here, which is analyzing the supply situation, the trends, the energy, the seasonality, and so on, the margins, the spot contract, and so on. But this is the result, okay? But the report is much more comprehensive. This is what we see for polypropylene. Stability until November. Then prices may go down, and then another peak of increases for February, May, due to the increase of demand, and then a slowdown as particularly the logistic issues will become less important, that there will be more imports coming available in the second part of 2022. So more imports, supply is improving, prices go down. Same for PE, by the way. For PVC, instead, the situation is very critical until now. We foresee increases until December, January, basically, where prices will stabilize and then start to go down. Here as well, imports will play a big role. Prices will go up and nowadays because also there are other international markets like India, like Southeast Asia and China, where prices are even higher than in Europe. So, as I explained to you before, PVC is suffering most because most of the costs of the energy are transferred to the production cost of PVC, because you need to electrolyze the chloralkali in electrolysis process. So cost is very impacting here. For PS, we saw a decrease in September, but already prices recovering in October, November, and December, and then extra supply, but also, let's say, less demand for the single-use products that will be eventually replaced by other polymers, will start to impact on the supply situation, making polymer more available and therefore pricing going down. Actually, going back to PVC, this is also a limit. You can go up to 1800, but then remember PVC for some applications like pipes, for example, it can be replaced by other polymers. So polymer replacements is always a factor to consider if it becomes too expensive to make pipes with PVC. Finally, with PET, we see coming 3-4 months of price increases, mostly due to the lack of imports from the Far East still, and then prices will stay more or less stable, but downturns as the imports improve in the coming months of 2022. So let's summarize what we have seen during this presentation. We saw that basically the polymer prices went very high or went very low because of supply-demand situation. And in particularly, many polymers touched their highs in May 2021. The logistics, we think, will improve, making more containers available for forwarders worldwide, and this will favor the imports in Europe in the next year, easing the supply, and therefore prices will start to go down for polymers. new capacities impact is there, because there's a, let's say, wave of capacities, particularly in Asia, being built for polyolefins. Not only, I mean, new capacities, it doesn't mean that China or Southeast Asia will export to Europe, but the thing is, if they have local capacity to rely on, it means they need less imports. So they will need less imports from the Middle East, and the Middle East will divert their extra volumes to other markets. And if Europe is attractive, they will divert it here. Energy cost, we cover the issue, but it's going to be a big challenge, particularly because producers, they started to, first they were the PVC producers, but many are starting to consider energy surcharges, varying from 100 to 200 euros per ton, which is big impact on the polymer price. But in the end, these extra costs will be transferred only if there is a good demand from the market. If demand will start to falter, to go down, then this become again to be considered in the costs of the polymer production. So nowadays there is this kind of trend of asking for energy surcharges, but it might be only limited to a few months until we see the oil prices going down. And eventually, unfortunately for you all, and the price volatility will remain high, because it really, you see, there are many factors at any given time. One factor can be impacting, can be the force majeure of producing plant in a region, can be geopolitical tensions, can be many other things like the logistics and so on. So price volatility will remain high, and we are there to support you, of course, with this. So with this, I have finished, and if you have any questions, you are welcome.
Okay. Thank you. As far as we are not a lot, so please feel free to open your micro and make your question directly to Ezio.
Comments also are welcome, or if you don't agree with me.
Meanwhile, I can start with some questions by myself, but please feel free, any of you, to open your micro and do the same, right? I was something that I would like to know your opinion about is about shortage. You have talked about prices, trend, and everything, but the concept of netbacks that you have mentioned makes me think about competing for the polymers itself. So I'm wondering if shortage maybe can also occur in some of the polymers. What do you think about that?
Yeah, shortage was very critical for some polymers in certain periods, and this also for other materials is true. And this also makes you wonder why Europe is seeing our industry as a polluting industry or a dangerous industry and so on. I think the backbone of an industry of a modern country is chemistry. So I think that having a local production to be, let's say, not so dependent from outside markets is important. And in Europe, we are seeing investments. We are seeing, let's say, for example, the modern polymer dehydrogenation, propylene dehydrogenation units. We are seeing crackers based on gas, natural gas, and so on. So there are modern investments that can help Europe to become less dependent on these imports. But imports are importance for Europe is increasing. It was, if I'm not mistaken, about 16-17% of the total demand in 2019, Plastics Europe data. So we need imports, particularly for polyolefins. For other polymers to a less extent, but then when these imports are not available because many reasons, because of the transportation costs or because other markets attract more, then it's an issue. For example, think about we may be helped by extra imports from the US. US have a very good cost position for the ethylene industry, because they have this shale gas, shale oil, and so on, and therefore they can export to Europe. They could export to Europe a lot of polyethylene and PVC as well, because ethylene goes into PVC production as well. But we couldn't see this happening in 2021. The reason is, well, apart from logistic issues, containers and so on, there were also weather issues, the hurricanes here and there. So you cannot rely always on these imports to satisfy your hunger of polymers. So in short, yeah, Europe is a market not growing so fast as other markets, but still important, 50 million tons of polymers. We think that that also recycle will increase, because there are legislation, the directives, EU directives are towards the total circularity of the economy, and therefore the producers are starting towards what I think is also a very good solution, which is the chemical recycle, total recycle of the waste, plastic waste, which you cannot recover mechanically or in other ways. You break it down to the monomers and you utilize again. So you not only become a responsible industry, but also clean industry, which is what we miss right now as an image of industry. So yeah, shortage of supply of polymers is critical for polyolefins, and still now you see the prices are very high level. And only imports can help us there. Yeah, that's in short what we see. But being the price is higher than other regions, it may attract more imports in these months. So we shall see, if as long as logistics provide a solution of available containers, we shall see more and more imports coming to Europe from Far East and from US. Okay, so shortages, from your point of view, shortages can still happen, and absolutely, and may happen. Fortunately. Okay, another question from my side. Please feel free, any of you, to open your micro. Again, I insist on that, but if not, I continue with my questions. I've seen some of your graphs in which you find a big correlation between the demand and the polymer price. How you estimate the demand is going to be, because we've seen that the evolution of the economy has been adapted, and we are not very sure about what is going to happen next year regarding the economy evolution, and so the demand. So how you expect this to affect directly to the prices? Well, yeah, demand is something difficult to understand, particularly in the medium longer term. Longer term, I mean the next year or so. Therefore, because as I said, supply we control, because we know how many tons are produced in a given country, how many tons are imported, how many tons are exported, and so on. But demand is split in different sectors. So like nowadays, automotive is completely stopped for other reasons, but he stopped and he stops also the polymer consumption. But in other sectors, like building and construction, like packaging, there is very, very strong demand, and the forecasts are in line with the GDP growth, which is 5-6% this year, and maybe 3-4% next year. Also for Europe, very strong recovery, particularly from this. And if you count building and construction, packaging first, which is about half of the total consumption of plastics, and building and construction financed by the very strong stimulus of the governments, we think that the demand will be there. And unfortunately, in some cases also price increases or driven by speculation mostly. I heard already some suppliers of the building and construction saying, oh no, buy because next year, apart from the shortage, which you cannot buy the scaffoldings or whatever, because even steel is not available, or the plastic sheets to cover the scaffolding is not available. But they announced 20–30% price increases. I mean, the end products, not the raw materials. So I think demand will still be there because of this stimulus by the government. I didn't mention before for the supply thing that you say the shortages and so on. Unfortunately, some people think that they are caused by the lack of production locally, which means maintenances and force majeures. Force majeures you cannot control, of course. And by the way, we made an analysis; they were more or less in line with the previous years. And the maintenances, I mean, as well. So somebody told that the maintenances or the stops of plants in Europe were higher. At least this is the impression we have. In fact, it's not true. It's average, okay? But of course, a force majeure can have a big impact on price because it is psychological. Your producer is saying, sorry, this month, last month I gave you 100, this month only 80. And the reaction of some people is, sorry, I want 120, in the hope that they can get 100 again. So these all expectations are building up also on the demand. But apparently the demand is still there, and we see the demand is genuine. That's important thing.
Okay. Well, maybe regarding the maintenance and the major forces stops from companies, we have a different perspective, maybe. But one last question from my side. One effect that we've seen regarding the raw material price increase of the rest of the materials, for instance, metals, it has created an opportunity of substitution of metal by polymers, because the polymer temperature is lower. So in this context of energy price so high, this is an advantage of polymers versus other materials like metal. Do you think this will not affect, or yes, to the trends of price evolution of polymers?
Well, it depends how much replacement, but definitely that is a trend that is already happening. But of course, with the increase of metals prices, it's even more serious because you move to a lighter and cheaper eventually option. But in general, this, let's say, new applications take a lot of approval time for the shelf life or to pass the tests, life tests, and so on. So I don't think it will impact so much in, let's say, next year. Okay, it's a trend. It will increase. It will make a few percentage of extra demand there, but not as a big factor, not as a major factor. That's my opinion, of course.
Okay, so anyone, questions, comments? Well, my last concern was only regarding one of your sentences saying second quarter of 2022 will recover kind of normality. What do you call normality? I mean, what is the normal situation? Is it flat graph, or is
no, the comment was related to the logistics. We are seeing already logistics prices going down. Imagine that logistics for the majority of big exporting countries, these guys, they have already contract made, so they didn't suffer much from this increase because they had booked their capacity, so they didn't pay the 4 or 5 times higher prices. What we think is also that this will lead to the exporting countries to make more agreements, contract agreements, so less spot and more contract agreements, so more stability. And the fact that this pandemic situation eventually will come to an end less congestions in ports, more containers available, more ships going around. This will lead to normal prices like pre-COVID. That's what we foresee. No flat prices. And also for polymers. Some people think, for example, for metals, but also for plastics, that prices may stay high. I think it's a wishful thinking by the producers. I think the moment the supply demand is coming to normal levels, prices will start to go down, even to pre-COVID levels. That's what we think, because in the end, it's supply demand that matters on the commodities. So,
so I wish you were right, and we will recover level prices pre-COVID. I'm a little bit more accepted, even I don't know much in detail, but hope it is. Ok, no sé si hay alguna otra pregunta que antes de cerrar la sesión quisiera hacer alguno de los asistentes.
Yes, please tell that the presentation will be sent out, shared, and so on. So, and if you have questions also afterwards, you're welcome.
Okay, great. Bueno, como decía Ezio, compartiremos su presentación con todos los asistentes, así como su contacto. Por lo tanto, también para preguntas futuras dispondréis de su contacto directo. So I think no one else is having doubts. I don't know if this is positive or negative. I cannot tell you for sure.
Scared worse.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Ezio, por tu participación en la sesión de hoy. Gracias a todos los asistentes también y lo dicho, si no hay ninguna cuestión o pregunta, cerramos la sesión aquí en tiempo, perfectamente en tiempo, y lo dicho, compartiremos la presentación. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Gracias, gracias a todos.
Bye.